Welcome back everyone to the Minigun tutorial part 2, and if you haven't checked out part 1, look in the description below for a link to part 1. We're going to get right to it. For those of you who've not watched, we're going to try to keep this under a half hour. My estimation is it's going to take about 2 hours to complete this, and we're going to have multiple episodes following up, episode 1 through however many it ends up being. So if you hadn't seen the first episode, check in the description below for part 1. So here's where we're at with part 1, where we left off. We're in part 2 now. So we're going to add a little more detail to our second middle bearing. And I'm going to begin by deselecting my surfaces. I'm going and select the center bearing. Go into model mode. Select our middle bearing. And we're going to do a loop selection. Select. Oops, get my face selection tool. Select, loop selection. We're going to select this inner set of faces here. And we're going to extrude again by right clicking, enter extrude. And we're going to come in to the very center there. And we're going to right click while we still have it selected and choose extrude. This time we're going to extrude inward. So that's dragging to the left. To put ourselves a nice little ridge in here. Alright. So we've added a little detail of that. A different type of detail than what we have in this front bearing. Or end bearing. So, alright, I'm going to deselect by selecting my live selection tool. Clicking on my work surface. And now what we're going to do is add a little bit of detail to these barrel tips. And we're going to put some collared areas around the barrels and each side of these areas. So I'm going to select my live selection tool, go back into object mode, and I'm going to begin by hiding this cloner, and I'm going to hide that end bearing also, and we're going to get in nice and close on this barrel. We're going to select it, have our face selection tool enabled, and we're going to go to select, loop selection, and we're going to grab this outer edge of this barrel. What we're going to do is bevel this a little bit so that it has more of a machined look. And while we've got it selected, right click and choose bevel. If you get a little bit of an angled view on here, it helps. And then so we're going to click and drag to the right to just about like that, and that puts a bevel on that. But we're going to go a little bit further. We're going to extrude that bevel so that it comes out and has a nice little tapered look to it. And we're going to add more subdivisions to it by clicking subdivisions, and that just helps when this gets rendered to have a smoother taper to it. So we've added a nice taper to that, and if I turn that cloner back on, turn that end bearing back on, render that out, you can see that that's applied to everything. Alright, so we're going to hide that cloner object again. We're going to hide, I think maybe not, let's leave our end bearings and middle bearings visible for right now. But what we want to do is get back into our live selection tool. We're going to select our cylinder, and we're going to manipulate an area in the center of each of these bearings, but we're going to modify faces on the cylinder. So while you've got your cylinder selected, go to select, loop selection. We're going to select this entire piece of the main barrel, not the bevel, but the main barrel. And you're going to need to have your camera or your positions of your scene lined up so that you can see the face of this bearing and this barrel. So once you're ready to go, right click your work area and choose knife. And we're going to insert a loop cut. See how we're inside the bearing here. At this point we need to be outside the bearing. Let's see if we get at a better angle where we can see that. We want to be outside that bearing just a little bit, something about like that. And then click to insert a cut. We'll do the same thing over here. Rotate around. and we're going to do one about right here. So we've inserted a cut just outside of that surface of that bearing, but on the barrel. Okay, we're going to move back, and we're going to do the same thing with this bearing. We'll put a loop cut about right here. We'll move over here. We'll put one about right there. So you with me so far? We've got loop cuts on each side, and the same thing down on this end. Now, let's take our live selection tool, deselect everything. I'm going to disable the middle bearing from the view. I'm going to disable the end bearing from the view. And we're going to take our loop selection tool, select loop selection. We're going to select this area, that slice we just made, and this area by holding shift and clicking, so that we've got just these two areas that we've selected. Now that we clearly can see they're selected, let's enable our end bearing and enable our middle bearing, and we're going to come down on this end and get a look at what we're about to do. Okay, so while we've got them both selected, right click and choose extrude. You're going to drag to the right up something about like this. Okay, before we go any further, let's enable our cloner. We want to make sure that these pieces that we've extruded aren't extending to where they're touching each other. And if we extruded too much, these would be touching each other, so I think we're looking good at this point. So if you're with me here, go ahead and disable your cloner. And let's zoom in again. And while we've got that selected, right click and choose bevel. We're going to drag to the right. Okay, just a little bit. Let's turn our cloner back on. We want to make sure we're not touching. You see how these, as they get beveled out, the diameter of them expands. We don't want to have them that they're touching. So disable your cloner, and here we're going to adjust our extrusion a little bit more. Something about like that. And I think that looks good. So try to get yours so that it looks like that. You can enable your cloner and disable it just to make sure that they're not touching. The more you manipulate these surfaces, the closer they get. You just don't want them touching. And that applies that bevel on both sides all the way down so that it's uniform. Okay, these are going to kind of serve as grommets. If you're familiar with any type of engineering or machining, these would be grommets, something that would secure these barrels into place. So let's go ahead and get a quick render of that, and you see we're looking good. We've added our beveled on our gun barrels, and now we've added some grommet inserts here on our bearings. Alright, so let's take our live selection tool, deselect everything, go back into object mode, and what we're going to do now is we're going to insert this main center rotational shaft. So let's drop our cylinder into our scene, and the majority of this cylinder is not going to be visible. It's going to be inside the center of these barrels, so a high polygon count or rotational segments isn't going to be necessary. Let's leave it at the default 36 segments. We're going to change that to the Z plus rotation, and we're going to extend it out so that it is just short of the barrels. We may want it to be, let me zoom in here where you can see, may want its length to be the same length as our end of our end cap, but not so much that it comes out past our barrels. So if we move it into about something like that, that's close enough, and we should be overall approximately the same length. We're a little bit short, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make sure that I'm longer than my whole setup here. And I'm going to reduce its diameter. Something that's a little bit bigger in diameter than the barrels. This is going to be a little beefy support rod that's in the center. We don't want it so beefy that it becomes a problem. Something about like that, because we're going to do the same thing with some grommets around the inside of it to give it some support mechanism. So once you're happy with that and you've got it looking similar to this, And at the end here, we're going to be sticking out just a touch. That's fine. You don't want to be sticking out too much. A few inches would be fine. So you want to be, move it. What we want to do is be moved out in on this side. Let me get back in here where we can see the whole thing. This needs to come in a touch. Something about like that. You see what we've got? It's just about how you want that to be. And on this end, if we're sticking out too far, which I think we are, we can shorten the whole piece a touch and then move it back down here to get it where we need it. So something about like that. And then you can double click it or double check it down here. So everything, if you've got it looking similar to this, you're going to be doing pretty good. As long as we're not touching our barrels. We don't want to be touching any of our barrels. So if you're right here, we're going to move on to the next step. We're going to hit C on our keyboard while that cylinder is selected. Let's rename that. Let's call that main rod. Okay. And once you've renamed it and you have it selected, hit C on your keyboard to make it editable. And we've made that editable now. So what we're going to do is we're going to, let's hide our let's hide our end bearing. Let's hide our middle bearing. And let's hide our cloner so that we've got this selected just like we see it here. And what we're going to do is apply a loop cut just as we did before with our grommets. So while we've got it selected, take your face selection tool, go under select, loop selection, and we're going to select this entire face just like we see. Now let's make visible all of our other elements again. And that's what you need. You've been able to see your end bearing and your middle bearing. So we're going to right click while we've got everything selected and choose knife. We're going to zoom in and we're going to make another cut about like that. And another cut about like that. So we're going to move back down to this bearing and do the same thing. One about right here. And one about right there. Alright, so let's hide our end bearing. Hide our middle bearing. Take your live selection tool. Deselect everything. We're going to go into select loop selection. I'm going to click this. Make sure it's selected. Press shift and click this so that both of our cuts that we've just made are now selected. Alright, so we can enable our cloner object, or I'm sorry, we can enable our end bearing and our middle bearing. And we still got our cuts selected. While they are, right click and choose extrude. And we're going to pull these guys out a little bit. And we want to verify by enabling our cloner that nothing's touching. And that looks about right. If you went too far and you are touching, just do Control C and re-extrude. Control C will or Control Z will undo, and then you can do it again and maybe make your extrude a little smaller. And then so we've got that selected. Let's right click bevel. Let's get a zoom in here, and we're going to drag that to the right a touch. And that puts a nice little bevel on that, just to give a little additional detail. So I'm going to enable that, make sure everything's visible, get a quick render. You can also take, let's do this, let's deselect everything with your live selection tool. Take and go to select, loop selection, and we're going to select this interface. And here, what we're going to do, we're simply going to bevel that and give it a nice rounded look. So while it's selected, right click, choose bevel. We're going to pull to the right and round that off nicely so that it's got a nice look. And we can take that extrusion distance and drag that out a little bit if we wanted to give it a more futuristic look perhaps. something about like that. We render that. That looks like a nice machined piece on there that would serve to support and hold that in place. Alright, so we've got all this looking pretty good now. Let's move on to inserting our main body of our minigun here. Let's drop another cylinder into the scene. This one here, we're going to give it segments of about 100. We're going to give it some pretty high detail. And we're going to rotate it on its Z plus axis and slide her on down here. Okay. Let's get these guys so that they're just about to intersect those barrel tips. They can touch or be close. We can still move this around in a little bit. We're going to fatten this up. Now this is up to you. I'm going to fatten mine up by changing its radius to about something like that. Remember, we're going to add extra components onto this, but it's up to you. You can have a big fat one, you know, something like that. You could be very sleek and slender. I'm going to make mine, I'm going to put mine at 70, 75. And I'm going to bump my rotational segments up to 150. Give me a little bit more detail for rendering here. Alright. So I think we're looking good there. Once you're convinced that this is what you'd like, this is the way you want it, you've got enough segments, your radius and your height segments or sizes are appropriate, go ahead and hit C on your keyboard to make that editable. And we're going to optimize this since we've made that editable. So if you don't have your optimization function available on your command list here, let's go up under a window, customization, customize commands, and under your filter type in optimize. Oops. Okay, optimize to where you see this kind of a little recycle bin, a little series of circular arrows, and drag that over here. Let it go. Alright, and once we've made that editable, click your optimize command. That's going to remove any points that have been left remaining in the scene here. Alright, so we're going to get ready and perform some little bit of detail on this face here. So go up top while we've got this selected, select loop selection, and we're going to select this entire outer face and rotate about just to make sure that you've got it. And again, we're going to do some inner extrudes and extrude. So right click, inner extrude, and I'm going to give this a thickness about like that so that it would represent the case that's on our minigun here, on the minigun body. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do an extrude, and I'm going to do an extrude inner, something about like that. Then I'm going to do another extrude, and I'm going to go, whoops, I'm going to do an extrude inner. I'm going to come back in a touch, and then I'm going to do a extrude, and I'm going to come back out with this one, something about like that, just to look like there's an additional component in here that give this canister a little bit of interest. Okay, now what I'm going to do is, while I've got this face selected, I'm going to make some rollers. I'm going to minimize so that you can see here. Now miniguns don't have these, but I think they look really neat, and it's just another element that you can animate, and just adds a little bit more detail and interest. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a track for those. But it's all inner extrudes and extrudes. So what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to do an inner extrude, and I'm going to come in a little bit. Alright. Then I'm going to do a extrude, and this is just basically to create a line. It's going to be such a faint inner extrude or extrude. Watch here. I'm just going to go in just a little bit. Just a little. You'll see it's hardly any at all. Alright. Then I'm going to do another inner extrude, And we'll come in a touch, something about like that. And then I'm going to do another extrude, and it'll come out a touch like that. So that's like there's a little groove right here. And all these areas that we're extruding and inner extruding, we can apply separate textures to those just to give more detail, as if they're different types of metallic materials that are being involved in this. And then finally I'm going to do one more inner extrude to about right there, and then one more extrude outward, just to act as if there's this, let's come on out about an inch, just to give that a little bit more beefiness. So you see what we've got here. Alright, I'm at 20 minutes here. I'm going to try to take this one about a half hour, so let's get moving forward here. What I'm going to do is, while I've got this face selected, I'm going to choose right click, bevel, and I'm going to pull that outward a touch just to round that off a little bit. You see how we've got that. I'm going to add a little bit more subdivisions on that just to give a little more refinement. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and choose my live selection tool, click off of everything. I'm going to do a loop selection on this particular piece here, and I'm going to right click and do an extrude on that. So I'm going to pull it back out like that. Just again a little bit more interest, as if this thing's been machined, and it's just a little bit more intricate in its appearance. We can go one step further if you want. We can take this face, this outer face, by right clicking, deselecting everything. Go under select, loop selection. We're going to select this piece here, and right click again and do extrude, and we can pull that whole guy out just to give a little bit more detail going on in there. So I think we'll leave it at that. I think we've got enough detail going on here. And we'll have an area for our rollers to roll in this track that we'll texture to look like rubber's been riding on it and rolling around on it. Something we're going to do before I close out this particular part 2, is to deselect everything, is go up here to your display, and we're going to choose ground shading with lines, and that's going to give us a nicer look. And as far as us being able to see the shading and the lines as we're modeling, it just gives you a little bit more idea of the depth and detail while you're actually manipulating surfaces and faces. So this is going to conclude part 2, and we'll get started on part 3. I'll try to do one of these a day and get them uploaded the same night that I do them. So stay tuned for part 3, and look forward to talking to you later. Bye-bye.